Welcome to this video, Practice 2, the second video in the Mechanics of Practice series of the Desperate Pianist. The videos that make you practice in much more detail than other piano videos do. Here we'll get really stuck into the nitty-gritty of exactly how we're going to use our practice techniques to become better pianists. It's important to hit the practice on a piece pretty hard to begin with because you need to build up your memories. If you practice on a piece and you then leave it, your brain says, oh, I don't need this memory, I'll forget it, and then you have to start all over again. Whereas if you practice on a piece and then a few hours later you do it again, the brain says, oh, I need to use this, I shall lay down a more robust memory. So you can't take any days off at this stage. In fact, you shouldn't be taking any days off anyway. But if you can work at it at least twice a day and 3 to 4 times would be good. Normally start from the beginning. You could start at a difficult bit, but you don't know where that necessarily is. And you need to have the order of the piece in your mind. It doesn't want to be disrupted. And then don't try and practice the whole piece, just practice a section 4 to 16 bars each time, so then you won't be taking on too much. And leave the pedals alone at this stage because your mind needs to be focused on laying down the basic memories for the piece in question. You can't go wrong. It sounds good, doesn't it? But you can't go wrong if you play the music exactly how it's written. And practice it and learn it exactly how it's written. Nobody can say you're not doing it right if you're doing it right. Render all the notes accurately, hold them down for a correct amount of time, observe the rests correctly as well. The composer has put them in for some reason, and you'll find that in the long term this will mean that your musical abilities will be much better and your rendition of pieces will be much better. Keep your hands and fingers relaxed, don't build up any unnecessary tension. Mark in the fingering that gives your hands the most efficient and relaxed way of pressing the keys. You're always going to get it wrong and have to make adjustments, but if you can get it right as much as possible to begin with, then you won't find you'll have to change it later on, and it's quite hard to do that once you've laid down the memories. Don't play repeated notes with the same finger where possible. Have a look at this. You should play the same note with different fingers if you can. Here's with the same finger. I have to move my whole arm and it actually aches in the end. And then if you use 2 fingers, you can play almost as fast as the piano can cope with it. Even if it's trivial, sometimes you have to put the fingering in to let your fingers know what to do. This piece by Barry Mann, It's Getting Better, illustrates our points quite well. If you look at the bass line, it's fairly simple. It's just 1 note at a time and a lot of repeated notes. But actually they can cause confusion. And there's a little jump here. And here there's a little rundown. And if our fingers aren't in the right place at the right time, we're going to be dithering. It's going to cause uncertainty and our performance won't be quite so secure. Use your fingering to facilitate the phrasing. That means the fingering helps us with our musical interpretation of the piece. We can see how this might help us by looking at the Love Theme by Nino Rota, where we play this bar. Now my 4th finger is on this G, and we could play the next G with a 4th finger. But if I lift my whole hand up and then use my 3rd finger, it starts the phrase and the whole main theme off much more evocatively and beautifully. And also you might only have to leave your finger where it is for it to be in the right place. For example, if there's a long rest between the same note. Here in Beethoven's Für Elise, you'll see that there's a broken chord here and then one much later here. So don't let your hand go wandering off and then have to refine the original position. If you just leave it where it is, it'll be in the right place. Okay, grab your sheets of cardboard and cut them so you can leave any selection of bars, measures, visible at once. At this stage we want to leave 2 bars free, but we want to be able to bring in difficult jumps or funny rhythms or anything in what we can see. But by far the best way to demonstrate what I'm talking about is demonstrate it. I've cut these 4 pieces of cardboard and they can more or less do everything I want to do. We're going to have a look at these, this line really, and these first 2 bars. So if I want to cover those, I use this piece of cardboard and that piece of cardboard. Now, I've chosen this piece because it's got a little jump here, so we want to perhaps include that in our practice for these 2 bars, because then we can learn that difficult jump more easily. And then another thing is that once you get to wanting to do these 2 bars, it's really inconvenient, this particular piece, because that bar is a lot longer than these. So it's quite useful to have a piece of card that will go in the middle. And I've had to cut this second one here. Now that'll cover that bar there. And then I could use this bit of card to cover to there. So now I can see these 2 there to practice on, although that one's exposed. We won't be kind of connected to that one. And then when we get further down the page, we could have this piece of cardboard and that piece of cardboard, or that piece of cardboard and that piece of cardboard when we want to cover that small bar again. And then when we get lower, we can just keep combining the different bits of card to cover the bars that we want to cover and expose the ones that we want to see. This is where the real action begins, and we start with Ben's rule of 3. Now we've got our 2 bars ready to practice. Now what we're going to do is play these 2 bars hands separately until you can play them 3 times without a mistake. That's correct notes, rests and rhythm. Why 3 times? Because if you play it once with a mistake and once without, that's neutral. It's no use. Never ever do that in your practice. It's just a waste of time. You've played it once wrong and once right. So which is the one that's right? Now if you play it once with a mistake, not right, and then twice proper without a mistake, that's an improvement. If you play once with a mistake and 3 times correctly, that's even better. And then after that, you enter the law of diminishing returns. So if you play it 10 times instead of 9 times correctly, that is better, but you haven't really gained a lot with that 10th time. So I find that the best thing to do is to practice until you can play 3 times without a mistake. And to do this, you can begin as slow as you like. Really slow it. Slow it down further if you need to. That's another skill you need to do, to be able to slow down if you still find that you're being overloaded. And at this point, at the very beginning, if you make sure you're playing it without mistake, it doesn't matter how simply, how slowly, then you won't bed mistakes down into the piece. Ben's rule of 3 isn't fixed at 2 bars. If you find it's too much for you to absorb at once, then reduce the bar or measure to 1.5 or even 1. Just get into the habit of being able to accomplish Ben's rules without too much trauma. If the music is simple enough for you, you could start with both hands together if you find that that's something you can do. Hands separately is always a good idea, and you can come back to that if you find you're having trouble later on to solve a problem. But it's a good idea to have both the concepts of hands separately and hands together. Modern songs can be very syncopated. That means the notes come at difficult places in the beat, And it depends on your education. For me personally, I'm more classically trained, and I find you can have a lot of problem getting the beat exactly right at this stage. Now, if you are, it's important that you don't embed the wrong rhythms into your memory, because you'll have to sort them out later on with more work. So you might have to introduce the metronome at this stage. Go to practice 3 for more information on the metronome, but just keep your eye open for that. Do not play faster than your comfortable slow speed that you found. And a good point is be thorough and honest that you've done Ben's rule of 3. Don't kid yourself that you've done 2 and a bit bits right and that's okay when you haven't, because the only person who's going to be kidded in the end is yourself. If you haven't already done so, put your hands together and apply Ben's rule of 3 for the 2 bars. Look at the key structure and the form of the music. Look for patterns and anything you can which might help you remember those 2 bars. Savour the sounds of the chords and notes, especially if you can with your eyes closed. I know I bang on about this point, but if you really love the piece of music, you'll find this is enjoyable, and the very basics of the practice will become where you make your music. It's where you're going to enjoy yourself. You'll be surprised how much detail is missed when you hear a piece at a normal speed. When you play really slowly and in this detail, you'll discover some wonderful chords and notes together that you otherwise wouldn't. Listening carefully at this point will help you build your oral skills, and it will open your ears to the wonderful music that you're going to be able to play. So let's look at these 2 bars in a practical way. As you can see, we're in the key of F major, there's 1 flat, and the remarkable thing about this first bar is that all the notes in the bar are either C, F or A, which is the 1st, the 3rd and the 5th of the scale of F major. So we can play the right hand, and that's just an inversion up and down of those 3 notes of the tonic triad. The left hand starts with F, goes to this chord here, which is the A, C and the F, and then to the C and the A, C and the F. So it's actually really simple. We don't have to learn a lot of this bar. If we can just remember that there's only 3 notes in it, and the right hand goes up and down again, and then the left hand plays the F octave and then goes and plays the C and then that same chord. So that's the first bar done. The second bar now, if you have a look, it plays this chord here. Now that's a C7. So we go into a C7 before we return to the F. So that chord there, look, is the same as that one and that one. And the F. Now there's some more shapes here, because if you look at the very bass line, it goes from the F to the C to the C to the F. So it's gradually rising up. If we remember that it gradually rises up, we'll then know that we never have to go down and play a lower note in the left hand here. And we also know that these 3 chords are the same, and then this one is different. So if we just remember 3 chords the same and 1 different. Now here we just come down in these triplets. Once again, that's just descending down. And that's a pretty easy bar to remember. So to play the 2 isn't going to take a lot of resources. It's a fairly simple piece. But if you can look at the shape, the keys and the general form, we'll get anything we can to make it more easy to remember. And then of course we did mention this chord here on the right hand side. So if we find that there is a jump, it's nice to include it that bit extra, because we'll learn it that bit more. Because we have to go up there, up to the B flat and down to the G. But that's something you can incorporate later on. This video is now running on overtime, so head over to practice 3 to continue.